Chapter 34. South Again. The battle went extremely well from my vantage point, Tyrion said as we sat down for breakfast. Unlike me, he liked his bacon burned black, something about the char spiking the flavor. I felt sorry for the cooks who had to intentionally ruin such good food for such a reason. I nodded as I poured myself a cup of tea. It went exceptionally well. But we had the advantage of numbers and being away from the one who controlled the dead. The White Walkers couldn't properly manage the dead through the press of pitch and dragonglass. A forward offensive was their only option, but Euron has been controlling the dead with more subtlety. We shouldn't think he'll be so rigid in their application. Well, I do hope you have pitch to spare, he replied as he swirled his wine, then took a sip from it. While he enjoyed charred bacon, it did tend to leave his mouth dry. It seemed to work wonders against the dead. The pitch will serve as a useful diversion, I said, blowing on the tea to help cool it. But we shouldn't rely on it. The Night King's magic is far stronger than that which he bestows upon the White Walkers. You think he can douse the flames permanently? Tyrion asked through a mouthful of grilled fish. I wouldn't put it past him, I replied after taking a sip of my tea. But now it seems that even the Night King is now just a pawn, beholden to the will of Euron. I cannot imagine how he accomplished such a task. Perhaps some spell is the reason? Tyrion offered a possibility. I shook my head. Euron is no magic user. That much I know. It has to be something else. Perhaps some item that would leash the Night King to him. Does such an item exist? Not to my knowledge, I mumbled, as I racked my mind for any mention of such an item in the books or lore. The only thing I could remember that might be similar was the horn he had that was said to be able to control dragons. I had long since cast spells to guard Mehrunes, Triana, and Aelfric against such control, but it had never occurred to me that he might try to control the dead. Extensive as it so often proves to be, Tyrion quipped. A knock at the door interrupted my response. Serena entered, exuding the confidence she normally held as she gave us a smile. Your Grace, the men are prepared to leave. We await your presence. I sighed and looked around the room. It wasn't the Red Keep, or even up to the standards of most nobles, but it was warm and had a fire going. I still hated the thought of going outside so far north, knowing that cold was waiting for me. Serena chuckled. It's funny that you'll face an army of living corpses but hesitate at a little cold. Little? Tyrion gave a mock gasp. Is that a dig at our Queen's Height, Lady Cowsland? If it were, my lord, it would be a shallow hole, Serena replied snarkily. Tyrion laughed and motioned to her as he looked at me. Did you hear her? I laughed and nodded as I began to don a thick fur coat. I did. As if a small hole in the ground could hope to contain my ego. Serena sighed. Here I thought we were simply talking about your person. I'm afraid I can't imagine a hole large enough to fit your ego in as well. We shot each other catty looks before laughing. I'll be out in a minute, I said as I grabbed thick rabbit skin gloves. I just need to put on my layers. Serena stepped in further and closed the door behind her, her voice softening as she spoke. Are you doing better since the battle? I have an immediate goal and the determination to see it through, I replied, as I continued to add additional fur skins to my outfit. That's better than having time to dwell on it. Merida. Serena sighed as moved behind me and leaned down to hug me from behind. You can't let this consume you. He wouldn't have wanted that. It's not just his death that has me upset, I replied as I looked over my shoulder at her. I know for a fact that if I wanted to, I could open the earth beneath their feet and crush them all, or create a magical fire that could consume them, or a nuclear blast that would see them disintegrated in an instant. But seriously considering those options for even a moment? I paused as my stomach churned, my face going pale as the idea settled in my mind. I nearly doubled over as the thought took hold and growled in frustration. I have to learn why I can't just do that to end all of this. She squeezed me gently. Don't concern yourself about it. Your strength isn't in your powers. It's in your ability to inspire others to do for themselves what you could do on your own. You make people into the heroes of the story instead of the narrative being only about you. It's like you've said before, it's better that the men be a part of the victory so they can feel that they contributed to their own success. I suppose I have a point, I smirked back at her. You usually do, she chuckled. I still need to figure out why I can't do what I would like to do, even though I know I could, I replied as I finished putting on a pair of fur-lined boots. Something you have time enough for, she replied as she stood. But for now, we need to head south. Tyrion walked over and hooked his arm with mine. She's right, my dear. Give yourself time to think about it. For now, the men need your leadership, I agreed, and we stepped out together to find men ready to march south. The Queensguard formed up around me, and we made our way to our horses. Once we were mounted, the move south began. The going was slow, as all troops' movements are when moving so large a force. Thousands were left at each of the castles in case Euron attempted to try and take it once we had left. We passed through the small wildling villages that were beginning to spring up. At the moment, they weren't much more than a collection of huts, but the promise of more was there. It was something worth fighting for, at least. A good portion of the wildlings believed so as well, joining us in the march south to help protect their people. The trip to the southern defenses took nearly a month, but we made up for the thousands left at the castles, with numbers of wildlings and northerners who joined us. I smiled when we arrived at the Trident, its rushing waters a welcome sight, representing warmer weather. Ned had not been idle in the time between his departure and our arrival. A respectable stone wall was already taking shape. Already it spanned the distance back to the neck, leaving the marshlands to perform their natural duty as a cumbersome barrier for the dead. Work on it was still continuing, reaching towards the Twins, the massive home of the Freys, which acted as both castle and bridge. The men we brought with us began to split into two groups. The first began to set up camp, making temporary lodgings until we could figure out how to best distribute them. The second group, made up of craftsmen and engineers, immediately moved to assist with the work on the wall. The transition was seamless, but continued for hours as our numbers continued to file in. The nobles and I continued into the main encampment, led by sentries to a large tent where an argument could be heard. The argument went silent as one of the sentries entered the tent to announce our arrival. Several moments passed by before Ned and Lord Walder Frey came out to greet us. Walder was an ancient man with a bald, age-speckled head and features that resembled a weasel. He was a craggy, nasty man who didn't bother hiding his leering, lecherous gaze as he appraised me. He truly had no shame. I felt a disgusted chill run down my spine as he joined Ned in bowing before me. "Your Grace," Ned addressed me with a smile. "It is good to see you again. Work on the defenses has begun in earnest, as you commanded, and word of your victory against the dead beyond the wall has reached our ears," Walder added, his grin greasy and placating. "Congratulations are in order." His tone told me that he didn't believe that we had actually fought the dead, but it was clear he wasn't going to voice his opinion openly. I gave a respectful smile. "Congratulations are not needed when doing one's duty, my lord." "Our thanks, then," he replied immediately, not one to take a slight lightly, "for being a monarch so willing to perform those duties." "I am but a servant to my people," I bowed my head, accepting the gesture. I turned my attention to Ned. I heard arguing as we approached. "What is the cause?" Walder's countenance soured as Ned answered, "Lord Walder believes it a violation of his lands to build the defenses you commanded." I said no such thing, Walder protested, though it was clear he was lying. I merely stated that I should be compensated for the use of my lands. I am at Her Majesty's command, as are we all. I held a hand up to stop his sniveling, giving him a reassuring smile. Lord Walder is correct. We are using his lands without his permission, and he should be fairly compensated. If I offered to make your lands more secure and ensure that the Freys have more control over who crosses the trident, would that satisfy you, my lord? The glimmer in the weasel's eyes was unmistakable. Walder carried a grudge on his shoulders, as many noble families had slight him and his as in the past. They mocked him and called him a coward, though not without reason. What they saw as cowardice and opportunism, he saw as practical decisions that ensured the continuation of his house and power. And it was the promise of that added power in more control over the trident that he clung to. That would be acceptable recompense, your grace, Walder sneered at Ned. Turn then, I smirked down at him as I motioned to the wall being built in the distance, and see my promise already being kept. A wall built high and strong along the banks of the trident so that no one might cross, even with a boat, except by way of the twins. Walder's face fell as he looked at the wall, understanding that he had just accepted the trap he had tried to lay for more influence turned against him. He knew well enough that the wall would give him more power over trade and transportation, but he had wanted more. Coin, position, influence. It didn't matter. He simply wanted more. More to prove to those who mocked him that he was better than them, more powerful than them. I could see him trembling with fury and annoyance. This will be the opportune time to thank your queen for her generosity, my lord, Tyrion quipped. Walder whipped around to glare up at Tyrion, his frustration clear as he bit his tongue. He looked at me, curbing his reaction, his lips roiling as he tried to come up with a reply that wasn't weighted with venom. Finally, in huff, he bowed his head. Your grace is most generous. I shall remember this kindness. He made an attempt to take his leave, but my call halted him in his steps. Lord Walder? Your grace? He replied as he turned back to me. I would like to join you in your home tonight for dinner, I said with smile. Would you have me? His annoyance was palpable as he bowed his head. Your grace is always welcome in my halls. I shall have a feast prepared for you. A private dinner would be better, I replied. I want to speak with you about something most important. That seemed to get his attention. He bowed and smiled his greasy smile. So it shall be, your grace. As Walder took his leave surrounded by his sons and grandsons, Ned gave me a grateful expression. Your grace has more patience than I. He was grating on my last nerve. I laughed as I dismounted. So we found at least one thing in this world that can break the ice of Lord Stark's patience. And here I thought you were implacable in such matters. It does not serve anyone to lose one's patience, Ned offered a slight smile. But the man is ever the buzzard, picking at your resolve one grouse at a time. We entered the camp, and Ned caught us up on everything that had been happening in the south. Walder had been allowing refugees to pass north freely, though he had his family keep an account of how many crossed. The Freys were not in the business of allowing passage without some form of due. The wall was going up quickly, with thousands already helping in the task, and more now put to it with my arrival. House Reed would hold the neck, using their knowledge of the bogs and mastery of guerrilla warfare to hold back the dead if they tried to push through the region to flank us. The pressing matter was the battle that would no doubt find us here. The Tullys knew the mountains to the west too well to lose, is to the dead, who would be too clumsy to scale the rocks and too tightly packed upon the trails to make passage easy. Mehrunes and the dragons would hold the eastern shores, setting fire to any ships which harbored the dead. What remained of our fleets would hold position at the Bight, guarding White Harbor and watching for any ships trying to sail further north. The twins would be the only path north, and Euron's forces would have to claim it to gain a foothold. All we could do now is prepare. That evening I was escorted to the twins. Serena had been thankful that she didn't have to join me. Walder had disgusted her upon our meeting, and she didn't want to be anywhere close to the man for longer than was necessary. The Queen's Guard walked behind me as a group of Walder's sons showed us to an audience chamber where Walder was waiting, sitting at the head of a table that had been prepared for us. The man has no shame or humility. He smiled with his twisted teeth at me, raising a cup as I entered. "Ah, Your Grace, welcome to my home. Please, sit and dine. I'm curious to know what you wish to speak to me about." I ignored the slight and took my seat, though I could feel Robert's anger mirroring my own. He did not voice it, but I could tell he wanted to throttle the old man. "Thank you, my lord," I replied as I took up a cup that had already been filled with wine and sipped from it. "Your hospitality is noted. Tell me, Lord Walder, what does family mean to you?" "Eh?" Walder was taken unaware by the question. "A great deal more than it does to you, I'd wager." "I've yet to kill all of mine." I smirked at the reply. "I've still one more to go in that regard. Though you would have a considerably larger task at it than I did." Walder chose to take the response with pride. "My family is larger and grows larger still. I am over-encumbered by their numbers and their constant attempts to jockey for my favor, as if I would favor any of them, preening shits. All they long for is my death, so they fight for my chair." "The law would make such issues pointless," I sipped my wine. "Your eldest son inherits your title, position, and responsibilities." "That was certain enough," Walder nodded. "Until you came along, Your Grace. You killed your family, gained your father's seat regardless of inheritance rights, and by your actions put in the minds of daughters that they should also be able to inherit their father's lands. Now, even my daughters speak of being the ones to take my place when I die." I chuckled and sneered at him. "I can assure you that I wasn't the one to put that into their head. Women have always found it unjust that even though they're older, a cock, or the absence of a son, brother, or male cousin was what stood between them and their rightful due. Do not mistake my success with the reason women want something. It merely gave them the courage to voice those desires after thousands of years of being denied them." Walder grumbled. "What does this have to do with your question?" "I'm sure you know that the twins are the only way forward for the enemy," I replied, setting my cup down. "Your family has much to gain and much to lose in the defense of the realm. I wanted to know how dedicated you are to your family and their success in this battle." "I don't pretend to love them," Walder said matter-of-factly, "but family is all we have in this life. Others may say what they will of me and mine, but hold position. This is a fight being brought to our doorstep, not by our choosing. And, with the phrase being the deciding factor in this battle, it falls upon me to see what the wisest course of action should be." I looked at the man, reading between the lines of his answer to find the truth. He would do his part up to a point. Then he would look at both sides of the fight and decide who he thought would be the victor, then lend aid when it truly mattered to tip the scales. "That's what I thought you would say," I sighed. Hours later, Walder died of a heart attack. Sir Emmon Frey, Walder's oldest surviving son, was named Lord Emmon Frey that very night. This was fortuitous, since Emmon was husband to Lady Jenna Lannister, Tywin's sister, and Tyrion's aunt. This made the elevation of Emmon much more valuable, as he would have more cause to aid us than Walder ever would. Walder was buried the next day, placed in the trench where the next section of the wall was to be built, so that he could always serve in the defense of the twins and the trident. I couldn't say his passing upset many people. After all, if there was one thing truly standing between the living's victory over the dead, it had be Walder.